The autos and locals windows are two special watch windows in which the variables are automatically added by the debugger. They behave very similar to the watch window, except you cannot add variables yourself. I'll show you what I mean. Click on this Run button. Now look at the bottom of my screen. You'll see there are three tabs down here: Autos, Locals, and Watch 1. This is the default layout of Visual Studio. If you don't see the Autos window or the Locals window, you can add them. Just make sure you're in a debugging session like I am, and then go to the Debug menu and choose these two items. I'll start by looking at what's in the Autos window. And before I show you, let's get into this method, this work with book method. So I'll press F11 to step into that method. And then we'll talk about what's happening. As you move through your code in your application, the Autos window shows you the lines of code nearby the current execution point. So in my case, I'm in C#, so it's going to show me a few lines of code above this line of code. If I'm in Visual Basic, it'll show me a few lines of code above and a few lines of code below my current execution point. So right now I can see this variable, which refers to the current instance of the class. In this case, it's the main window class, and I see the greeting variable. As I step further into my code, you'll see more auto variables showing up. Now I can see there's the message text block instance, which is a control on my WPF window. I can also see the message text block.text property. I can also see that the message text block.text property changed when I click step into, and I now have some red text here. Remember that red text means the most recent change in the autos window or the locals window or the watch window. I'll keep stepping through and note that some of the variables disappear. They're no longer close enough to my execution point. Now at this point, I'm ready to enter this other method, work with XML data. So watch what happens as I step into the new method. The list of variables changes. Now it only shows me the variables that are nearby the current execution point inside this method. And then I'll press continue to run. So that's the basics of the autos window. The locals window is similar, so let me show you that. Switch over to the locals window, step in my code till I get to the work with book method. Now what do you see here? In the locals window, you only see variables that are declared within this method, and they're local variables. So I can see, again, this variable, and I can see greeting, book, and tax rate. As I step through my code, you won't see any differences. This list stays the same until I get to this line. Now, I just ran line 35. Visual Studio 2013 and Visual Studio 2015 added a feature where when you return from a method call, like I returned from this method called toString, the locals window will show the results of that return from that method. So even if you don't have a variable to store it in my case, I was taking that data and storing it in this text property in this message text block. But this will work even if you weren't storing that in a variable. This provides a way of you to see the results of a method call even if you didn't use the value. On line 37, I'm going to call this work with XML data, and I'm going to pass in two parameters. So keep that in mind as I step into this next bit of code. Now I'm inside this method, and my local variables reflect the two variables that are inside this method, doc and text. It also reflects the two parameters that were passed in, XML file name and use schema, this Boolean parameter here. And when I exit this method, I'll return back and see the list of local variables that are in scope inside the working with book method.